All right. So we are, I'm going to try this again for Chapter 5, Learning. Learning is a very extensive and often complicated thing in psychology. We'll learn about classical conditioning, operant conditioning, and observational learning, and and such. So here we go. It's complicated, but maybe me describing it will help understand it a little bit better. So here we go. Alright, so the learning outcomes for this is we're going to learn about classical conditioning and how conditioning happens in everyday life. Every day we've been classically conditioned. Our pets have been classically conditioned. It's a biological process that happens to almost any animal that's out there. And I'll explain extinction and generalization and discrimination. Okay, so a little bit about learning. Learning is something that we humans are very good at. We're excellent at. All mammals learn. But learning causes a permanent change in who we are. Every single day we learn something new. Whether we know it or not, we experience something new, and it changes us forever. So essentially what happens is when you go to bed every night, you are not the same person you were when you woke up that morning. You are different. And so we really don't see those changes until they accumulate over time. So I'm not the same person I was 20 years ago. I'm not the same person I was when I was a teenager. So when you learn something, it permanently changes you, and you grow. And you're not the same person tonight when you go to bed as you are right now. So classical conditioning is about is biology, more about doing things. Pavlov's experiments with the dogs. We'll talk about the neutral stimulus and all that good stuff. Okay. So right here we have the famous Ivan Pavlov experiment. Ivan Pavlov was a biologist, a Russian biologist that lived in the early 1900s, and he was studying digestion of dogs. He wanted to know, salivation about dogs. So what he would do is he put these little beakers at the corner of their mouths that would collect saliva when they were eating food. Now, what he accidentally discovered is that sometimes the dogs would begin salivating just when the worker was walking up to the dog. And then he also discovered that when he would ring a bell before feeding the food to the dog would salivate to the food, or to the bell, and not necessarily to the food. And so what happened is this bell that meant nothing to this dog up to this point. All right, it meant nothing. The dog had no experience with the bell. The bell is just something that's heard, seen, but no response. Now this bell means something to the dog, and now when the dog thinks of the bell, the dog thinks of it as if it was food. And so the paradigm to this is that there's a lot of different parts to it, but I'll try to do my best to teach you guys. All right. Alright, so for classical conditioning to happen, we must have a neutral stimulus. And so for Ivan Pavlov, that was the bell. Okay? If a dog sees or hears a bell in nature, the dog has no response to it. It's neutral. Right? For human beings, let's think about it. McDonald's, we have the golden arches. If you had never experienced McDonald's in your entire life and you saw that big letter M, that big letter M would mean nothing to you. It's just there. It's seen. As nothing, triggers no biological response by you whatsoever. Okay? So the bell is neutral. the big letter yellow M is neutral. The golden arches are neutral because originally it was neutral. It meant nothing. But then if you pair that neutral stimulus with the unconditioned stimulus, so for the dogs, it's food, dog food. And for us, McDonald's Golden Arches, whatever you enjoy from McDonald's. I like Big Macs, and their fries are always delicious. You can't eat them very often, though. And so, if we pair these over and over again, well, now the neutral stimulus means something. It triggers a biological response to salivating by the dogs, and every time I drive by McDonald's, I get hungry. Now, is that something I'm voluntarily doing? Am I behaving in a way that's voluntary? No, it's causing a physiological reflex, a biological reflex, whenever the dog hears the bowl, or hears the bell, or whenever I see the golden arches. Okay? So when pairing those, classical conditioning begins to happen. Now, an unconditioned response always pairs up with unconditioned stimulus. They're always together. Alright? An unconditioned stimulus causes an unconditioned response. It's natural, it's innate, it's reflexive, you're born with it. Alright? A dog naturally salivates to food. It just naturally does. We get hungry when we're around food, a Big Mac. Okay? It's a natural response. It's biological. It's not something I learned to do. It just happens. And so the dog naturally responds, unconditional response to the food is salivation. My response when I am fed a Big Mac is I get hungry and I want to eat it. So now that that neutral stimulus no longer is neutral, and now that it means something, now that it triggers a physiological response, we have to change the name of that neutral stimulus. And we change that to what's called a conditioned stimulus. Because it's learned. It's not neutral anymore. Condition means learn. So now, instead of just salivating to Big Macs, or getting hungry for Big Macs, or dogs salivating to just food, now it has essentially almost replaced the food with the bell, or the Big Mac with the golden arches. So now I have a conditioned, a learned response to that. Salivating to the dog food, or to the bell. Salivating to the golden arches. Alright? Conditioned is what is learned, a biological reflex that has been learned. Unconditioned is something you're born with. Okay? There's no learning required. So now conditioned is learned. Alright, so let's move over. So, again, we have, when I was little, this is a true story, half my family is hillbilly, right? I have my mom's side of the family is from the Appalachian Mountains, and we got, ding, 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 ding. And my grandfather lived in a house with no electricity, hot water. We had an outhouse. Anyways, one time I looked under a bed and I saw a mouse, and I picked up that mouse and I went out and I showed my mom. She screamed. She hollered. She jumped up and down. I dropped the mouse in fear. Okay. And so for a while after that, I was afraid of mice because of my mom's reaction. So this example right here is somewhat similar. It's called a Little Albert experiment. And what they did is a 9-month-old Albert.
Sounds like there's a band.
There's a 9-month-old boy, and they would present things, little animals, to the boy. A rat, a dog, a monkey, so forth. And the 9-month-old, you haven't learned to fear anything yet. And so what they would do after a while is every time they present little Albert with this little white rat, they would make a very loud noise by hitting something, and it caused fear in the child. So every time Little Albert was presented with a white rat. A noise happened. So what do you assume happened? Well, little Albert became very afraid of the little white rat. Classical conditioning. It's important to note that these types of experiments are not allowed today. You can't really cause any physical or emotional harm to people in experiments. Alright, what else we got? Okay, extinction is, let's say that the doctor, Ivan Pavlov, quit feeding the dogs food when ringing the bell. And he continued to do this over and over again. And so, what's going to happen after a while? Well, the dog will no longer associate the two and no longer salivate to the bell. If every time I went to McDonald's and they no longer had Big Macs, and I kept on going over and over again, well, guess what? McDonald's is not going to cause me to be hungry when I see those golden arches anymore. It's not going to make a difference. It's called extinction. A spontaneous recovery is when the reemergence of what was extinct. So maybe one time Ivan Pavlov feeds the dog food when he rings the bell. Well, then immediately the dog begins to remember, hey, this happened in the past, and then he has relearned that the bell means food. Maybe McDonald's was out of Big Macs for a month, and I got tired of going back, and then one day I go back and I did have Big Macs, and then next thing you know, those golden arches means Big Macs again. So that's spontaneous recovery and extinction. Okay. Okay, generalization. Okay. With little Albert, when he was scared by the white rat, not only was he scared of the little white rat, he was scared of all animals. So that included the white rat, the dog, the monkey, and whatever animals that he had. Okay. Or when I see the golden arches, I generalize beyond Big Macs. I generalize that they have good French fries, they have good double cheeseburgers, or what have you. Okay. Or other fast food restaurants who have burgers that are just the same. I generalize all fast food. Similar to discrimination is, little Albert only being afraid of the white rat and not being afraid of anything else. I only like McDonald's because McDonald's is the only place to get a Big Mac. Alright? You're being picky, you're being choosy. Alright, so we're going to stop this video here, and then I'm going to come back and teach about operant conditioning.